Welcome to episode 42 of the Non-Fun Gerbils podcast. George was called away last minute for this one, so Dr. Dion W has stepped in to help. Also known as Dion W NFT on Twitter, he is a data scientist and works for MyNFT. Today we focus on security with Jonathan Wilkins, previously the CSO of Blockstream and currently the founder of Cloaked Wireless. Cloaked focuses on solving SIM swapping attacks in the space by creating a secure intermediary away from traditional telecom companies using Bitcoin message signing for authentication. We cover how big the SIM swapping problem is, some major vulnerabilities that are out there, seed storage procedures, poetry for error correction in passwords, and generally explore this topic. It was quite shocking how much of a problem and how easy SIM swapping still is. We hope you find it interesting and enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Non-Fun Gerbils podcast, the show about digitally scarce gerbils, non-fungible assets, and the growing decentralized economy.
Okay, so we are here today with Jonathan Wilkins. Jonathan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
You have got quite a long history with Bitcoin and security in the crypto space. Could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. I've been working in computer security for about 26 years. I started off working on something called a vulnerability scanner, something that goes out on a network, basically tries to hack everything it can and gives you a report at the end of it. Moved into privacy, working at Zero Knowledge, where I was the adversary, which was quite an amusing title. Basically tasked with looking at anything that had to do with the protocols and so forth for what was the predecessor to Tor. And then bounced around through some larger companies, Microsoft, etc. And I found myself in the Bitcoin space around about 2013, 2014, when I realized that some of the technologies that were being built into Bitcoin itself were actually very, very useful for solving a lot of the longstanding security issues you have in the InfoSec space. From there, I joined Blockstream and was the founding CSO there, and have sort of been in that space ever since.
Fantastic. So you've got deep inside knowledge of constantly trying to be attacked.
Absolutely. Yep.
That's quite a target for hackers.
Yeah. Blockstream certainly had its share of detractors and people who just wanted to troll, etc. And it doesn't matter what the size of the company is. It's a lot more defensible when you're looking at Bitcoin technologies. One of the things that drew me to Bitcoin in the first place was it was the first technology we've had in history where you actually can quantify the cost of an attack. We know what it costs to break into, to mess with the Bitcoin blockchain. It's the cost of making a 51% attack, or a more probabilistic, slightly lower than that percent attack. And that's unlike anything else we've had in history. We've had people building safes, vaults, castles, whatever, and the cost of attack was never quite what people expected. You had the famous history around the Great Wall of China, where they were the Mongols were able to just bribe their way through the wall. But Bitcoin was the first thing that you could put a real number that was meaningful on the cost to break the system.
Do you think that increased the amount of hackers that were actually, trying to be adversarial on the internet because there was, a clear monetary gain from it? Or were those people just doing that anyway, and there was always that hack going on?
Oh, with Bitcoin, I mean, it's always been an issue. But people have definitely been trying to attack anything they could potentially make money off. And the interesting thing is that Bitcoin's proved to be, a lot more resilient than most of the other things on the internet. The downtime, isn't really vulnerable to DDoS. It isn't really vulnerable to a lot of the sort of core problems that plague everything else. Every 10 minutes, we've got a block, roughly. The closest I would say that Bitcoin came to any real harm was during the SegWit sort of battles when the miners were able to sort of hold that process up. But the community and the nodes adapted, and we had the UASF fork threat, and that solved things.
So let's talk about your company. You've set up a company called Cloaked Wireless.
Yes.
What does that do, and what sort of problem does that solve?
So one of the bigger things that's been plaguing the industry and people in it for the last couple of years is SIM swaps and port out attacks. So essentially what happens in this attack is someone's able to get some of your personal information and contact your cell phone provider. And with that information, they're able to convince tech support, salesperson, what have you, to transfer your number to a new device or out to a different carrier. And since most people's root of their security these days winds up being your cell phone and that number, whether you realize it or not, that's pretty devastating. So you have your Gmail account. Your Gmail account probably resets via an SMS to your phone. Your bank SMS to your phone when you're trying to log in potentially. On top of that, most of the services you're relying on have that as sort of a backup. So you might have a GitHub account that uses a U2F, but if you lose your U2F token, you reset with an SMS or some other combination of things. So when you have your number stolen, the first thing they will wind up doing is just taking over the Gmail accounts, anything associated with it, and then go from there. Once they're in that account, you'll see some people having their social media accounts ransomed back to them, and other disturbing, things to wake up to. So the attacks have been getting more and more common as well because they've been so successful. There's a lot of money in this whole racket, really, beyond just what you can get from directly from a cryptocurrency exchange balance, which can be, unpredictably small or large. The other things you can get into are, while they're not necessarily as directly profitable, the more organized attackers are starting to, extend the attacks into the businesses that they wind up getting into. So you see things like you will have a very credible call to the CFO demanding a wire be sent out, things like that. And so all the other techniques that they've been using in other contexts are just getting more and more believable because it's coming from like the right number. You add to that a deep fake voice, and it's pretty challenging for someone to really even with the best of experience know that it's not a legit request.
So off the top of your head, do you know how many people are affected by this sort of scam?
Our best estimate is probably about 250,000 people in the States at this point, any given year. There was a study done by Princeton not too long ago. They basically did 10 accounts at each of the three major carriers. And on the first call, they were able to have the number SIM swapped every time for all of them. So 30 out of 30.
Wow.
So this is humans being the weak point in your security model.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So that's basically the point of our service. Basically, is we don't have customer support people who are able to make any changes like this. We have support people who will help you walk through the process. They'll tell you what you need to do, how you do it, but they don't have the ability to change anything. That's on you. So one of the hazards is if you choose one of the higher levels of security and you don't maintain the keys that are necessary, we can't really help you. Our tech support staff can't help you. But for people who are willing to self-custody their own keys, this is, not that big a danger for them. They are already probably custodying Bitcoin worth more than what they would value their phone number at. So if you're one of those folks, this is probably something you might want to look at.
So how does Cloaked approach making it more secure?
So we have a couple different options. When you set up your account, you can choose from something pretty minor, just a standard TOTP code like you get with Google Authenticator. That's our lowest level. But for the people who would like a much more stronger sense of assurance on their number, we support U2F tokens and also signing messages using a Bitcoin key. So you don't have to use your key that you're using for your other assets. You can use a BIP85 derived subkey, or a brand new key you create on the spot for it. But the general gist is, once you've got that key, we've got the tools in the Bitcoin space already to handle that correctly. We've got things like seed XOR and seed plates and so forth.
So, how does this look like when I'm, say I set up an account, set up a phone number, I want to link a Bitcoin wallet to it. What does that process look like?
You basically just connect to the website, authenticate. When you're initially setting it up, if you chose a lower level of security, you'd authenticate using that. And once you're in the portal, you're able to provide a pub key.
Okay, so you just provide a public key,
yep.
and then when you want to make changes to your account or anything like that, you in whichever Bitcoin wallet you're using, you just sign a
message.
Yeah.
Can you use an existing SIM, or do you have to actually buy a SIM from you guys?
So you have to get a new SIM or use eSIM.
Oh, so you will actually provide a SIM, a physical SIM to send out.
Yeah, that's just the way that the carriers work. If you're switching providers, you need to change your SIM or use an eSIM and have that do the magic on the network.
Okay, and is the purpose of this to completely replace your everyday phone number and to just say have one phone number, or is it to have multiple phone numbers for lots of things?
It's up to you. So some people will prefer to just use this as a new number that all their authentications will go through. So you might decide that your number that you put on your business card is, hopelessly compromised. You wouldn't want to try and secure that one. You can just basically get a new number with us and transfer your, update all of your services to use the new number. This is probably the simplest and easiest way to go about that. But if you would like to have your main number, we support that as well. You can port in your old number and just use that.
Okay. And is there any, I know that sometimes things like some services, you can have multiple numbers all on one account. Is that sort of a simple thing you can have, like almost throwaway numbers, burner numbers?
So burner numbers is not a service that we're providing at this time.
Okay.
It's something we might do in the future, but right now we're concentrating on just getting our launch done and starting with this service. So we have a lot of other plans for the future, but we'd like to get deeper into the network stack because there's a lot of things that happen there that you can't protect against otherwise. Things like there's a thing called SS7, which is a sort of back-end signaling system that's used between network providers. That provides for things like silent SMSs, which can be sent to your device, which will elicit a location update being sent to the network. And so this kind of thing is, concerning. And it's not just the kind of thing your telco can do. It's anyone who's got a device connected to this network or has hacked a device connected to this network. And that has been done, many, many times.
So someone can ping your address, basically?
They can, if they know your phone number, they can connect to an SS7 device and have your phone send a message back with its precise location.
Wow,
that's worrying.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So that's terrible because if you think about the Ledger hack and the fact that everyone's phone numbers were released and their names and their emails and their home addresses.
Someone with SS7 access can get their location at any time.
Is that something difficult for people to get access to?
A lot less difficult than you would hope. It's not the kind of thing that you can use AWS to get an instance on, but there are companies that are providing SS7 access as a service.
What's the strategy to protect against that for most people?
For most people, there's no real defense. Some of the telcos have done something where they've lowered the precision of those messages, the response messages. But not all carriers have done this. And, if you're traveling, you might be in a place where it's just not happening and you won't know what the case is without significant research ahead of time.
I suppose this is where privacy becomes important layer of a security strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something where having a different phone number is actually a major advantage. You can do something like use a forwarding service to route the number that you have on your card to a physical device and just rotate those devices regularly.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the only real thing you can do if you're very paranoid and you have a threat model that justifies it.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about people who've got their accounts that are full of Bored Apes and CryptoPunks and high value NFTs. And obviously because they're NFTs, you're signaling them and you're signaling your position. You just need to tie your real identity to that, and then that's potentially a problem.
Kind of wondering so as a security company, how much information and data do you require from your users to use your service?
So there are a few things that are asked by we're supposed to collect for E911 purposes, but we would like to keep as little information as possible on our users. We're not looking to monetize any data. We would like to collect as little as possible. And as far as we're concerned, it's an asset we have to protect, and the less of it we have, the better. So it's sort of like managing toxic waste.
Yeah, I do. I think the approach to data should be that it is a liability and not a commodity that you want.
Yeah. So we support payments via Bitcoin and Lightning, as well as credit card and that kind of the usual suspects.
So what do you? So obviously you've seen this gap. You can use a secure email account, or even if most people are using something like Gmail, which is relatively difficult to get into someone's account without social engineering.
Right.
But if you do get into it, then it's an absolute honeypot. Your email has everything.
It's everything.
You can search every account at every exchange and every service that they've used, and then from there you can if you've got the phone number, control of the phone number, you can reset everything basically.
Yeah.
So you're basically coming in at the layer 0 for the most important security layer.
That's sort of what we concluded. We were looking at some other possibilities for lines of businesses, but the core problem we found with everything else that we wanted to do was we didn't have this level sorted out for any business we were going to run. When I was at Blockstream, we had an employee who wound up having their device SIM swapped, and we looked at the problem and realized there was no real way to convincingly solve this, and the other than starting a telephone company, and the sort of threats that you wind up with are pretty hard to really quantify, because it's what happens when your NOC staff has their device compromised or their number stolen. What assets they have access to through that. Probably your domain registrar. With that access, they can just, you don't need to, I think people probably heard about, there were a couple of exchanges that were BGP hacked recently, or rerouted. So BGP tables are updated, and a fake site was set up, and the attackers basically were able to harvest credentials that way. This SSL cert was valid because they were able to essentially have Let's Encrypt or whoever issue new certs for those new hosts. And so when people went to log in, it looked like the legit site, and it wasn't. They were basically had their accounts and passwords compromised immediately, and the attackers were able to make off with a fair amount of money. If you are looking at that from an attacker who has now your registrar logins, you have a much simpler way to do that. You don't need to hope that the BGP tables don't get updated. You're waiting for a much slower process of, the registrars discovering this and reverting those records.
And that's all come from social engineering, that problem.
Well, if it's the case of someone who in your NOC staff having their phone SIM swapped, then it's not even social engineering. It's they've gotten into the registrar accounts via a password reset usually.
Yeah, no, okay. What are the sort of other threats that you're seeing out there at the moment?
The most interesting new one is something called Heartsbleed, which is play on the Heartbleed one we saw a few years ago, which was an OpenSSL thing that was allowing people to remotely dump memory from devices. This one is specifically related to crypto. I just read about it this morning, so details are still coming in, but the researchers were able to remotely extract a key from a system running a constant time encryption algorithm, which is rather scary. So it means that the algorithm itself had been written in such a way that to minimize the possibility of timing attacks. So, but the way they were able to do this is the way that a lot of the CPUs these days work is they've got a constant readjustment of the clock speed, and they were able to tease out from that, even using a constant time algorithm, enough variance that they were able to determine what the private keys were.
So would this be having access to someone's physical computer that they'd be able to?
This was actually a remote attack that they were able to demonstrate. I don't know. I haven't gotten into the weeds on this one yet, but it was, it might be a situation where they have to be using the same key for many operations over the course of time, but I'm not certain yet. We don't know also how this is going to play out with, the types of cryptography they're using in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. So it was a very specific one that wasn't anything I've seen in the crypto space yet. But and it might be that algorithm has particular weaknesses, but it's probably not the case.
Is this an academic attack, or is this actually out in the wild right now?
It's not being exploited in the wild yet, but the paper is the kind of paper that will put people onto developing exploit code, and I don't know how long it's going to take based on which algorithms are targeted, but it's something to be very cautious of. And if you have any concerns in this regard, move to cold storage as soon as possible.
And in terms of cold storage, would using a ledger with MetaMask, would that count sufficiently as cold storage, or because you're connecting it to a computer, would that be a problem?
Well, I think that if you have assets, when a bug of this class comes out, you want to be minimizing the amount of time it spends connected to any device at all. So, maybe get a second ledger for your day-to-day stuff, and keep your larger assets offline entirely until we know more.
Does this only affect crypto wallets, or does this can this affect encryption?
It's any encryption, it seems. This one looks like a really bad one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's terrifying.
It is. So hopefully, maybe it doesn't really work against RSA all that well, or but RECDSA, etc. But I don't think we're going to get that lucky, honestly.
What happens in a world where encryption is broken?
I mean, this isn't a permanent break on all crypto. This is, there are some workarounds. They involve just disabling the ability for the processor to adapt its processor speed. So you'll just have devices that are running in full, like essentially turbo mode all the time. But it's not necessarily the greatest thing for energy usage, and it's going to take a minute before people are able to make those adjustments to their systems.
So we need a whole lot of patching.
Yeah.
Presumably at the kernel level.
Or the hardware level, BIOS level settings, etc., or microcode.
Okay. Well, moving on to sort of more day-to-day kind of attack vectors. What are the most common weaknesses you see in someone's setup that they can sort of remedy right now?
I mean, keeping valuable assets offline is the best thing you can do. Making sure that you have a good backup scheme for your seeds, etc. So seed XOR is something that was proposed by the folks at CoinKite, and it's a good way to sort of take a given set of seed words and split it up into as many components as you'd like. In order to recover, you do need all of the things, all the components you split it into. So you can't do like a 3 of 4 kind of thing with seed XOR. You need 4 of 4 if you have 4 splits. But you can distribute the splits more widely, knowing that you need all of them in order for it to be valid or to be reconstructed. If you have a lot of assets that are valuable, it's good to just split them up in various ways. Don't keep all your eggs in one basket, as it were. The attacks we're seeing on some of the MetaMask users are quite dismaying. That it's as easy as it is to just you interact with a bit of code and all of your assets just go away. That's something that is kind of unique to the Ethereum world. We don't see that in Bitcoin.
Is that because of the browser extension sort of aspect of it?
Yes, but also just I think that the base scripting language being necessary for all operations, that's something that's unique to Ethereum. Like Bitcoin wouldn't do it that way. Bitcoin usually puts a proof of computation done into the blockchain rather than requiring every node to then execute code.
Okay, this is very specific to like smart contracts then.
So Bitcoin has smart contracts, and it always has. It's just that the language they're written in isn't JavaScript like. So it's still a bit more challenging to do more complicated tasks. But most of those tasks don't even need to be done on the blockchain. They need to be done, and then the proof that they were done needs to be encoded in the blockchain. So, we've got lots of complicated smart contracts in the Bitcoin space around like hash time lock contracts and so forth. And those things are seeing usage in, daily usage in Lightning and other things. And we'll see those techniques spread to the other parts of the cryptocurrency sphere. But the core is that you don't need to do that much in the blockchain. You don't want to have too much of that encoded as part of the way that your blockchain operates. We've seen the massive losses that people sustain just trying to get a transaction to work in the Ethereum space. You don't have in Bitcoin when you send a transaction to the network, it either it gets in the mempool or it doesn't. And that if it doesn't, you don't lose the money you've spent on fees. Whereas in Ethereum, if there's CryptoKitties like causing a lot more transactions, you see people they try and do something, not enough gas, and the gas is just burned.
Yeah, I guess that's just a difference in the structure of the way that transactions are are managed. Yeah,
and the frustration from that seems to be pretty significant, understandably.
Okay, so stay offline. Use a Bitcoin wallet, perhaps. Obviously, for people using Ethereum services.
Oh yeah, but
you can't. It's a lot harder to avoid using things like MetaMask.
But split up your assets. Get another ledger. If you've got a $2 million Bored Ape, you might want to keep that on its own unique ledger.
Sure. Okay, and then find a good backup. So an interesting conversation that I was having with another security person recently. Their opinion was that you should never store your seed digitally, ever.
Oh yeah, definitely not.
Is that an absolute hard rule to you? I mean, or is there situations where you'd want to maybe turn it digitally, put it in an encrypted container, put it one place, and then put the other half somewhere else and split it up, but in a digital way rather than in a physical way?
I mean, if I were using Seed XOR for it, maybe I would put one of the shares up like that. But I've got a pretty hard and fast rule about not key material like that. You wouldn't ever keep digitally. It's too much of a hazard.
Okay, interesting. I feel like this is going to be a wall I keep butting up against because I like the idea of having it in a digital form because obviously you can reproduce it offsite and have offsite backups. I guess you have to trust encryption, though, which is another thing.
So it's not so much the encryption so much as where you're going to unencrypt the thing, right? So if you've got an encrypted blob that you're storing in the cloud wherever you want, as long as the key that protects that is always offline, then it's pretty safe. But you can't really do too much manual cryptography for most of these algorithms. It's not like something you're going to just do on paper. So when you are downloading that and bringing it to another device, that device is wholly stored in a you never connect it online. You're only doing it via like QR codes or via flash disk or something, going back and forth. There's a plausible argument to be made, but it's much safer to just never keep that online at all. And the sort of OPSEC and the procedures around it are a lot easier to keep safe.
Would you recommend memorizing seeds as well?
I would not recommend memorizing a seed as your only strategy. I mean, if you memorize your seed, that's great. But the 5-year retention on that kind of thing is probably not where everyone would want it to be.
Yeah, well, especially if you have multiple seeds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's actually something that came out, some research that was done a few years ago about rhyming seeds, rhyming passwords, passphrases. And that is something that some people at Blockstream tried to turn into an actual thing for seeds. But the mnemonics didn't really, they're not like ideal for that, the existing ones. But Christopher Allen has it in the, the blockchain commons or Bitcoin commons repository. But if anyone's interested in taking a peek at that, but the idea is that, poetry actually gives you a lot of error correction. If you know sort of the meter and the rhymes, then you've got a few essentially checksums on the data. So it's a lot more possible to recollect something, 10 years from now.
I assume that must be quite limiting, though, finding all these rounding words. Or is there enough?
Well, no, I mean, you'd have the software, you'd have software search for it, right? Which, means you're cutting out a little bit of the entropy that you might have otherwise. But if you choose a larger dictionary, you can essentially have no loss if you do it right.
It's a very interesting form of poetry that I've not ever considered before.
Yep.
Fantastic. Well, anything else to add?
Just that hope that people find the service useful and come check us out at cloakedwireless.com. And it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Super interesting.